Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi aki ana te atākura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ki e Maurio.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Central Hawke's Bay District Council meeting. Good to see everyone this morning. Been a busy few weeks, so good to see everyone here. We've got a huge number of items today, but some important ones. So looking forward to getting through those. We do have this morning apologies from Sligria, who's nearly home. So can I have a mover and seconder for his apology, please? Councillor Taylor and Councillor Muggeridge. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Is there any interest that anyone would like to declare at the front end of the meeting? So moving on. Standing orders, our usual approach to standing orders. Can I have a mover and seconder for that, please? So Taylor and Councillor Moynihan. Those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Our most recent council meeting, we've got the minutes here from the 8th of May. Any questions? So Aitken.
Yeah, just curious why you've got me is from 9/11, just because someone called Liz or whatever her bloody name was complained. There's been a lot of other councillors walked in late and different times and never been actually put there. I'd like it removed.
So it's usually noted in the proceedings of the minutes at the point in time that the member comes in or out.
Well, that's
right, it's different that it's popped up on the list of those that are present. It usually comes in the order of events of the minutes.
Well, it's always very interesting that someone made a stupid complaint that I didn't turn up at 9/11 and then said that I have a conflict of interest from didn't leave their name, but now we've got it in the minutes. I find that quite insulting.
Where does it say the member of the public?
It was brought up during the meeting. If someone called Liz or Lisa complained that I turned up late, rang the front desk that I was late and I had a conflict of interest that I hadn't declared, and it was brought up during the meeting.
Okay, I have to say I don't recall it being brought up in the meeting, to be honest, but we've got on page 6 where the point in the minutes where you arrived, which is how it's usually recorded, but I agree that on the list of those present, where it's at the very top of the paper from 9/11, we don't usually record it like that. So I think we can remove it from there. Thank you. And Councillor, I agree that it's inappropriate for a comment from the public either outside the building or online on the stream to be brought by staff to the table during the meeting. I think that is not within the scope of how we operate. So I agree with you on that if that's what happened.
It did happen.
Okay, good. Right, can I have with that amendment to the noting of that, taking it from the top of the minutes, removing it? Can I just check that that is still appropriate?
Just probably just noting upon that I'm not aware that the council staff table.
It wasn't tabled, it was commented.
Okay, well let's just do some follow up on that one because I'm not aware of it. So let's follow up.
Okay, good. We could have resolved that before the meeting today. Okay, so apart from that, everything else as circulated be confirmed as true and correct. So good. Councillor Taylor. Anything further to add? Those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Reports. Our first report is our resolution monitoring, which is on page 12. Mr. Tate, have you got anything to speak to on this?
Great, thank you, Your Worship. Just noting that there are a couple of items that note has been on track, but we're on track to complete those today. So one being the establishment of the Hawke's Bay Community Trust. So in our agenda is an item to appoint that trustee. So again, that's well on track. Other than that, everything else pretty comfortable with where we are travelling. So in terms of annual plan, obviously we've got striking of the plans today as well. So other than that, happy.
Lots of progress on these things, and the other update on the item 7.3 Matariki review of regional structures is that we have a Matariki governance group meeting tomorrow where there will be an update on the progress on those recommendations, and I'll circulate that around to everyone when it's been through. Okay, so can I have a mover and seconder please to note the resolution report? So Enand, so Witchman. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against. Carried. Right, item 7.2, setting of the rates for the 25-26 financial year. Mr. Chamberlain, take us through this.
Sure. So good morning, councillors, your worship. So you'll recall that on the 8th of May, around this table, we met and discussed the annual plan and adopted that. So that set the budget for the year. So that's the amount that council's going to spend and what it needed in revenue to make the books balance. UV have also been in the process. They have revalued the district, and that's all the new property values have now been loaded into our accounting software. And so what we have now done and what's been presented here is us taking the budgets that you approved in May, taking the new property values that have been independently set by quotable value, and then done the maths, dividing one into the other to arrive at what the rate factors are. I won't go through them all, but you'll see there a whole list of rate factors for general rates, for water, for land transport, etc., etc. What I will point out is that on page 24 of your agenda, you'll see the 2024-25 factors versus the 25-26 factors, and you'll see what the change by factor type is. I have also undertaken a dummy rate strike using last year's values just to show you what the impact has been because of QV and what the modified factor would have been if we'd stayed with last year's property values. But otherwise, I think it's a fairly straightforward report. It is just taking the budget and taking the property values and dividing one into the other to arrive at a factor for the year.
Thank you, Mr. Chamberlain. Questions? This is kind of the legal part, the responsibility for us to translate the budgets into how that's rated. Questions about what's been put here, Councillor Moynihan?
Yes, thank you. Just looking on page 24, and could you refresh my memory, please, why the refuge collection amount has decreased by 31.2%? Refresh what that is.
Yeah, so overall solid waste hasn't actually decreased, but what we have done is in the background as part of our review of solid waste services, have actually broken solid waste into the different components. So we've looked at what it actually costs to run a curbside collection process, what it actually costs to run the transfer station, what it actually costs to run the landfill operation itself. And we have rearranged slightly how we allocate the costs to the different activities to ensure that the right user is paying at the right stage. So while you might see a small decrease in the curbside costs, there is a reflective increase in, say, for example, the transfer station pricing or the recycling pricing as we have better analysed and rearranged where the costs fall.
Okay. Right, Councillor Boone.
Sorry, yeah, through you. This is more a local water done well question than than maybe setting the rates question, but it's related. So the local water done well requires councils to charge a regulator fee based on population rather than connected. And their reasoning is that councils can't tell how many connected ratepayers there are.
Mhm.
Are we able to provide that information? It seems silly that a council doesn't know how many people are connected to them.
So my understanding from the explanations I've had from the regulator is that different councils do it different ways. So we charge per building that is connected. So say for argument's sake, you were talking about a hotel with 10 units. We would charge 10 lots of water because they're 10 individual dwellings. Whereas other councils, for whatever reason, treat that as one building, one connection. And so there is a bit of fruit salad when you try and compare across New Zealand. So the DIA have taken the easy route and decided to charge by population, which actually disadvantages rural councils like ours, where only half of our population are connected to water.
Thank you. It's Margaret.
Yes, thank you. Is all of tourism and economic development in the UAGC?
Yes, I think it is. I think the UAGC covers swimming pools, and so public swimming pools, not private swimming pools, libraries, and the economic development and social development activities.
Yeah, yes. Yes, but I just want to point out that both that question and this current question are things that we've worked through actually as we've created the budget. It's not actually relevant to us striking the rate, so I'm going to allow it, but just we're a little bit off topic.
Forum and people outside, they don't get to see a lot of our debating, so it's just.
Yeah, but they are things that we have publicly debated and discussed at previous items, but I'm going to allow it, but I'm just saying we're in a line.
Next question. Does it take a rating review to get it out of the UAGC?
I believe it would, because that would be a change in how we're doing things in terms of rates. So you could potentially shift it back to the general rate, which would then put it on house property values as opposed to a flat charge per property.
But if the revenue and financing policy has got both UAGC and general rate attributed to being used for collecting that, then there is the possibility to mix between the two at different rates at different times without changing the rates review.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and
check though.
I'd have to go back and read the revenue and financing. Certainly at the moment, the current policy is that we're collecting it through UAGC.
Okay, so let's just, thank you, Mr. Chamberlain. Let's just work through the components of the, so this is always a really weird and clunky thing to kind of take through the council decision making because there's lots of me talking at you. Apologise in advance. Recommendations are that having considered all matters raised in this report, that we have pursuant to section 23(1) of the Local Government Rating Act 2002, the Central Hawke's Bay District Council resolves to set the rates, due dates and penalties regime for the 25-26 year. And we'll just work through each of the components. So the general rate, which is the activities are listed there, 25-26 year, will be struck. There's two different rates here because there is a differential. The CBD areas of Waipukura and Waipawa pay a differential of 1.4. Everyone else in the district pays 1, and so that reflects in that rating factor. The uniform annual general rate, number 2, has for the 25-26 year, this rate will be $452.67, including GST. Every property pays that charge. Then the targeted rates. So the land transport rate is considered a targeted rate, where for the 25-26 year, it will be struck at a rate of 0.20766 cents per dollar. That is based on the land value of all rateable land in the district, the land value. The water supply rates is also a targeted rate just in the urban environments where households are connected to water services. So that is across Otane, Takapai, Waipokoro, Waipawa, Kairako, Porongaho and Porongaho Beach, Te Pairahi. And there is a half charge for those units that are there but are not connected. So this is connected rate is $1,581.04 and serviceable but not connected is half of that amount. Metered water rates, those that use extraordinary volumes of water, the meter rates are displayed there at different volumes, but they all have the same charge rate, which is $3.21, including GST per cubic meter of water that is metered. Sewer rates are listed for 25-26, similar to the drinking water rate in the particular areas. There is the first rate charge is $1,425.92 per separately used inhabited part of the rating unit. There's then the rates flow into additional PAN charges and those that are serviced but not connected at half, so same as the water rate. Stormwater rates are collected on the basis of a targeted rate on the capital value of all the rateable land across Waipokoro, Waipawa, Takapo and Otane, but with differentials. Waipawa and Waipokoro paying the differential of 1, but Otane only at 0.8 and Takapo only at 0.6 of that rate. Curbside recycling rate for the year is $136.84, including GST per property in the curbside zones. Refuse collection is $36.93 for those in the collection and groups as well, which includes quite a number of our settlements. The TOT drainage rate, which is set by the committee in charge of that scheme, and the total amount of funding required for those particular ratepayers is $103,500, which will be broken up per point in a point system to 140.59826 cents, including GST per point. And it's a very specific targeted regime. The rest of the resolutions covers the definitions of approach to rating, the rating base, the due dates for the rates year. So the due dates the 20th of the month following, so 20th of August, 20th of November, 20th of February, 20th of May, and the penalty dates coming the day after that. The due dates for metered water is the 20th of the month following the invoicing. We also have penalty charges that are stipulated there as well, through the payment tax of those rates. So, recommendation is that we strike the rates as described. So can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Anand? Someone else? Councillor Anand, would you like to speak?
I need to say that there has been a lot of work going on behind the scenes to get to this point. It is, like you say, a clunky time when you read it all out like that, and that happens very well as to the work leading up to this limit and as we progress into the financial year. So know that can go down, but it just isn't something that can happen.
So, Councillor Taylor.
Just to add, it was interesting to note the process that Mr. Chamberlain did to see what the QV effect it had, because that's what the ratepayers are seeing in their the way their rates go up or down. So it was interesting to see exactly what effect QV had on what people be paying. A good second.
Anyone else like to speak?
Thank you. Yeah, I'll support this, but I still think there was a couple more turns in the press here to get this down lower. There's some real hurt in the community about the level that the rates have risen, especially in the urban areas. And what I was hanging on about before about that UAGC, I think those sorts of things like tourism and economic development. A lot of people in those urban areas, which dominate where the low income earners are and the benefit people are, they receive no benefit out of that, and they shouldn't be paying the equal amount as people who are in a lot better position to pay their rates. I think it needs to come out of there and take some of the pain out of those connected people, because it's the water, the people connected to the water that are paying the main part of these, what we need to keep this infrastructure going. So yeah, I just think it's not quite even yet, and I think that we could have, as I say, put it down a little bit further.
Thank you. I mean, this is the final step in a process that we've been undertaking since late last year. In fact, for longer than that, because it was a year ago that we adopted the 3-year plan that said the rates increase would be projected to be at 14.9. The very hard work to down, to use Councillor Muggeridge's analogy, has got it to half of that. And to maintain as best as possible the levels of service that we need, while being very, very clearly focused on where the key priorities are. This is never an easy step to take, but is the legal step that we now take in this process. So thank you everyone that's got it to this point. Councillor Annan, do you have a right of reply? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Can I just make a note before we move on from this item? Can we please, the stormwater catchment maps have been inconsistently reported across our documents. Could someone just go and do a check on which one we're using, just to make sure that it's being consistently communicated and applied? Right, next item. Council financial results for 9 months, which is on page 27. So thank you, Mr. Chamberlain. Noting that you are kind of doubling up and bringing the timing a bit earlier than the finance committee meeting to make sure that we're prepared for year end and for audit and annual report. So to report the 9 months of results, but then actually forecast through to what year end for the end of June will look like. And thank you for that. It really helps build the right context. So over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Worship. Yeah, you're quite right. This report would normally go through the Finance Infrastructure Committee, but they don't meet till late June. And because this has got a year-end forecast, I thought it prudent to bring it earlier. So what you'll see on page 28 is our normal funding and impact statement for the 9 months to the end of March. What you'll see there is a series of overs and unders. Council, as I've reported in previous reports, is impacted by the New Zealand economy, and we have some activities, particularly building and resource consenting, and to a lesser extent landfill, that are driven by what the markets are doing. And as a result, those activities are showing volumes lower than what we budgeted to have. In the landfill case, we are able to cover those declining volumes because we have part of our cost structure is variable. So things like our carbon credits that we have to buy for the emissions trading scheme, some of our rent is linked to volumes. So some of those costs are able to be pulled back. However, in the consenting space, year to date, the costs that we've incurred are largely fixed. They're mainly staffing costs, for example. And so there will be a deficit in those activities. And I'll talk a little bit more about those, or actually may as well talk about them now. So when we turn our mind to the forecast and to next year, you'll see that we are planning to have slight improvements in that consenting area. So for example, we've put measures in place. So we had a small restructure of the teams earlier in the year to bring some of those costs out. We have reached out to another council and have picked up some of their consenting work. So we're utilising the resources that would normally be doing our own consenting to do another council's consenting, and that's generating a little bit of revenue. So we have been putting things into place to try and mitigate some of these overruns. You'll also note that our accounts this year are quite distorted by what's happening in the recovery space. So this is particularly roading recovery. So what I've tried to do on the bottom of page 27 is break our council results into what I would call business as usual, roading recovery, and then total. The totals tie back to the fizz that you saw over the page, but what you'll see is in the business as usual, you'll see that at an operating level at least, we're only $9,000 different in surplus to what we said we would be in the budget. The main differences come in the capital area. So this is where we're delivering a slightly different capital program to what we said. And again, it's largely driven by water in the BAU space. So things like the new water regulations that are coming out for wastewater. We've paused some of our work and we're waiting to see what impact that has so that we can make informed decisions with the latest regulations. And we're also looking at reservoir replacements and how we might stage those to get the best result for the ratepayer. So that's what's driving the variance in the BAU capital area. In terms of recovery, you'll see that there's a bit of a misalignment in terms of where the revenue was budgeted versus where it's now showing in our accounts. And there's also a little bit of misalignment in that when we set the 3-year plan, we were hoping that the government would give us a 95% funding assistance rate for that recovery work, whereas we had some work at the beginning of the year that was at 99%, and the work that we're doing in the latter part of the year is actually at 89%. So it's slightly different from the assumption that we used when we created the budget. So that's the 9-month result. I'll now turn to the back part of the report, which is the forecast. And what I'll probably do is just talk high level to it. So
Chamberlain, I'm just wondering if we just stop.
yes.
Is any questions about the performance reporting up until the end for the 9 months before we get to the forecast and the what next? Any questions about what's been reported in the 9-month results? No? That's clear. Well, it's well described. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so let's move on to the what we'll do next, the forecast, and then that carry forward process.
Yep. So what I'll do is I'll describe perhaps. So what I've shown here is the revenue, the expenses, the capital, and total fizz. But what I might just talk to is the total fizz at the end, because this is basically whether we are going to have a surplus of money or a deficit of money by activity at the end. And we have a number of ring-fenced activities. So for example, water rates are a targeted rate. And so we can only ever spend water targeted rates on water activities. We can't use them to fund a library. We can't use them to fund a road. When we collect water rates, we only spend them in the water activity. So what I have done is I have said, well, actually, they're ring-fenced. So if there is money left over, then that has to be carried forward for future water activities. If there is money that's short, so for example, if we've spent money in our capital area that we haven't collected rates for, we would debt fund. So I have zeroed those out. But just for transparency, at this stage, we think that drinking water is largely on track to break even, as is stormwater. We do think that at this stage, there will be a small surplus in the wastewater area, and we will be able to carry that forward and then decide what we're going to use that on in terms of wastewater programs going into the future. The same happens in roading. Again, it's a rate that we only use in the roading activity. Roading's a little bit different in that we get a 3-year funding envelope from NZTA as part of our BAU funding assistance, and we have a 3-year program. What we're seeing this year is that actually our delivery is slightly behind. If you had taken the program and divided it equally by 3. So there will be a slight rating surplus, but the roading team have 2 years to complete that program. So we will be carrying that surplus forward and make it available for them to use in year 2 and year 3 of their roading program. In terms of the cyclone recovery, because we're now doing work that is funded at 89% instead of the 95% that we budgeted, that will mean that council will need to use some of its debt funding and reserves to basically fund the shortfall between the two. So we actually have a small carry forward from the previous year, because the previous year we also funded at 95%, but we were lucky last year and that most of the work that we did was at 99%. So we have a small amount carried forward, and we're obviously going to have to utilise some of our reserves and some of our debt to make that one balance. The rest that you see there, which are all the ones at the top, are all our general rate funded or our UAGC funded activities. What you'll see there is that there is a mixture of overs and unders. And at the moment, based on my forecast, which is only a forecast, we have a very small surplus of about $49,000. Now that forecast is thin and could disappear quite quickly. And in fact, we had discussions this morning about one of our activities where we received a grant and we haven't quite spent that grant, and the way that this forecast has been written, it assumes that we have spent it. So there might need to be some adjustments. But what I have tried to do is go through and look at any of those external grants and try and work out whether they are fully expended and whether we need to treat any as income in advance or not. So that's already been taken into account to the best of my ability at the moment. But what I'm saying is that at the moment, touch wood, we have a small surplus, and that will mean that anything that is slightly overspent or under budget, like the consenting area, should be able to be covered by some of the activities that are underspent. But what the next step is, obviously we get to the year end, get the actuals, and start putting together the annual report, and we come back to this table with a full list of what the actuals are, and then we discuss whether we do that offsetting as I've described, or whether we want to do any carry forwards to fund future activities. So that's not saying this is set in concrete. This is just saying indicatively, this is where I think we might land.
Thank you for providing the forecast. Understand that it's a forecast, it's got the ebbs and flows, but it's good to get a sense of the direction of travel that we're heading in. It's only a matter of a couple of weeks now till the end of the financial year, so that's great. Thank you very much. The thing that we can probably focus on, councillors, is the sense and the feedback around that carry forward and what happens going into the new year. There's some logic and there's some rating principles behind some of those in terms of the directly rated and ring-fenced activities. So interested in the kind of the questions about that forecast and that carry forward area. The things that concern you. Mr. Chamberlain, when in the consideration of the where the Three Waters rates There is a comment in the paper about potentially being able to support carry forward, which could be utilised for local water done well transition costs, depending on the outcome. Would it be possible to, if that's the consideration that staff are going to bring forward, to make sure that when we do discuss that, that we also talk about what the other options in terms of if we spent that on operational work, or if we spent that on CapEx work, or if we spent that to actually offset the hard pipes part of the activity. So not just an assumption that it moves into a transition and operational and overhead space.
So there'll be three options. You could choose to retire some of your debt if you've got a surplus. You could choose to spend it on a future operational program, which would potentially lower future rates, or you could use it in the transition program as I've suggested. But that's not for me to decide. That's for this table to decide in August when we bring all the carry forwards.
And probably that just in a positive note on this one, this is again the first time in 6 or 7 years we've seen these activities in a break even or surplus place. So really positive work from the team to again flex the contract management work that's been underway and the real laser focus on budgeting activities as we've worked through the 3-year plan as well.
Yeah, it's no doubt that it's been a successful process. Absolutely. So good.
For you, so the surplus, although small, even though those land transport and the three waters are ring-fenced, does it stop us bringing surpluses into them? I mean, I know that three waters is very disconnected, but land transport affects everybody. So is there?
So land
So is that question whether a surplus in land transport could be used to put inside a ring fence of water and pay for water?
No, I know that
can't.
can't happen.
Yeah.
Because they're ring fenced, but if there's a surplus generated from other facilities that aren't ring fenced,
Sure.
can they
Yes.
be brought into?
Okay. So
ring
a general rated activity, if there's a surplus there, could that be brought into? Yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah.
Potentially you could. Land transport is a type of general rate. We've always treated it as standalone. But if it was the will of the table, it's collected on your property value, the same as a general rate, albeit on land value instead of capital value, but it's the same grouping of ratepayers.
It just gives us your question.
But yeah, it hasn't been something.
Not going to make much difference, but in the future, if we were to.
It certainly hasn't been something we've ever done in my time here.
It's not in line with kind of the principles of our rating model at the moment to do that. But I have heard community have asked similar questions actually as well. And some ask it because they're worried that we spend the water rates on something else because that's kind of a national narrative, which has not been a thing here for a really long time. But also that can other rates be used to support it.
And I can understand people being upset if we were to use a surplus and put it into water, which is only for a small part of our community. But yeah, I'm just wondering if there's something we can put into that benefit everybody.
That's in one hand.
Carrying on for that discussion where this could potentially be a little surplus. And is there potential that the little surplus could be used for reverse events fund? Because I'm saying that they must be depleted a bit.
Okay, so that's a good idea to put forward into the mix of how.
I'm just saying, could we consider that? Is it? Can you?
Potentially we could, but it hasn't, that's not generally, we've generally put that fund together from land transport activities. Because generally it's been used for land transport activities, but we could look at some of those things.
It's probably for the table a good reminder that the 4K, that 50,000 is so slim. Like it can go either way. So just I think when we get to that point of having the numbers finalised, we can work through the options and it's good feedback.
Could we also just talk about the general rate? Because basically what is allowing the general rate activities to kind of line themselves up is that the general rate where we had budgeted to be spending on community facilities and that sort of thing. We've deprioritised that, and effectively that general rate collected for those activities is now being used to offset in the general rate the regulatory activities, which generally in our revenue and financing policy are user pays. So we've got a kind of a clash of principles in that, and it's actually something Councillor Annand has brought up in the past, this idea that we've collected a general rate for the public good component of our work, but then we actually end up then subsidising the private by that washing up between regulatory and community services and the general rate. So we can't necessarily take that away because we have to be sensible with the funding, but if that, make sure we've got that thinking and some of the advice that comes back would be helpful. Okay, anything else on the financial report, Councillor Muggeridge, Finance Chair, you comfortable? Anything outstanding for you? Good. Okay, can I have a mover and seconder, please, to, thank you, Mr. Chamberlain, that council receives the council financial results for 9 months and the year-end forecast report for the end for 30 June 2025. Let's put a date on it so we don't lose track of it. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Second by Councillor Moynihan, I'd like to speak. Yes. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And I just want to share the thank you to the team who have taken a financial result earlier in the year where it was heading to turn it into something that is far more manageable. So I know there's a lot that's gone into that. And so thank you. And thank you for the teamwork actually that's happened between governance and management on that. When governance raised their issues really early on at the first quarter financial reporting, and actually then between us have managed to get to a really strong place. So thank you. Right, item 7.4. Proposal to grant lease, Portongaho Sports Club at White Domain. Right. Okay, and Ms. Welton, nice to see you.
Good morning, councillors and your worship. As you'll see on page 33 of the agenda, there are 2 resolutions that we are asking you to approve this morning. We're asking you to consider a lease to the Portongaho Sports Club for part of White Domain. We previously had the club present its vision and aspirations in March, and as you remember from the council's reserve management plan for White Domain, it contemplates that we recognise the club's significant role as the primary user of the reserve. So today we are asking you to approve a lease subject to not receiving any sustained objections following public consultation. So today we are asking you to wear 2 hats. The first is sought from council to grant a lease as the administering authority with vested control of the reserve. That's the first resolution. And then we ask you to take that hat off and put on the second hat, being that under delegated authority from the Minister of Conservation under the Reserves Act to approve the lease. And I will take that as the paper read.
Great. Thank you. Questions? Moynihan.
I'm reading through the details or conditions of the lease. No clarification, please. Who will be the legal owner? Is it the Ministry of Conservation or will it be CHB Council? Is it a combined ownership?
It's a Crown Reserve that's vested in council. It's the
Vested. So
we're the administering body.
right,
Yeah.
so they'll be the owner of the land.
They'll be leasing the club.
Yeah, so the land ownership doesn't change.
Right.
It's
The
public
lease.
land, it's public reserve land. Reserved for
So we'll
public
be like
purposes.
guardians.
We are.
That's how we'll be acting.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's how we've always acted.
Yeah, I know, but I just reading through it, didn't quite, yeah. Right,
Councillor Aitken.
In the past, we've had a lot of conversation around invoicing, charging for leases on some of our public land that we own. for various clubs. And I may have missed it in this contract, but is there any there and there around the $100 lease per annum, inflation adjusted, and anywhere in there that we can actually shift that value up if we decide, or this council decide at a later date to actually revisit trying to have a fair and equitable pricing to all our bits of land that we lease to various clubs.
So at current, there is no community leasing policy. But this lease will have the rent subject to any future community leasing policy. So we will be able to adjust it should that come.
So that can be done at any stage. They understand that, and is it inflationary adjusted?
No,
Because in 33 years, $100 ain't going to go far.
yeah, I know.
Not going far today.
Just through you, Your Worship. So in the absence, and this table will recall before I started, you did some work on the community leasing policy, I think odd years ago. So this process of the $100 without is consistent to how we've done the other leases. So the last one that this table did was probably back in 2019, it might have been, or 2018, which was the Otani Arts and Crafts. So we've done a lot of these, but very consistent and similar process to Otani, and the exact same approach that we are taking in Takapau as well for the health centre as well. So same foundational approach in the absence of a community leasing policy, leaving the gate open very much so.
That's Councillor Annand.
I'm just wondering what plans you have in terms of consultation.
So under the Act, we will have to consult the community under section 119, and that's for 20 working days.
That's just sort of publicly notified and then people take an interest can.
Or support. Yep.
What other targeted channels the relevant and interested people will be considered, not just sticking it in the
Public consultation. Yep, signs on the fence at the domain. Obviously, with the lack of the paper now, we'll have to be in the Hawke's Bay today. Website.
We'll also do
Social media.
we'll do a targeted Let's Talk CHP page that'll have the content available as well. So talking with the sports club as well, they're quite keen to do a small video just talking about what they're hoping to achieve. And the key premise really is about making sure that the whole community understand what's at hand and support it. That will be our primary focus.
Thank you. So I'm reading between the lines. That means that things like flyer drops around to the village or to that wider area, a targeted communication maybe to the marae or the Hapu Authority, to the other clubs. Are we thinking like that, or are we thinking just the legislative Reserves Act process?
Through you, Worship, not expecting flyer drops, but we'll do the website, we'll do some signage, also an expectation from the club that they'll be doing some of this work as well. So great, it falls back to us, but an underlying principle of success on this thing is not just us leading this. This is a two-way street, and they need to have they've already done some of that foundational work. So they've spoken with all committees, they've spoken with the Hapu Authority and other members out there. So again, we'll be working with them to work through what that looks like, and also what they'll be doing to support in terms of community understanding of what the lease proposal is and those sorts of things.
Through you, Your Worship. I missed their presentation back in March, but I just hope they've acknowledged where the land came from and how the council acquired it. Kia ora, which is through one of our eponymous wahine rangatira Rākapa many generations ago. So that's quite important to not forget. Because that's a huge bit of land. Ideal for the new marae.
I'm not even sure that is captured in the reserves management plan, to be honest. So there was a bit of work done when we did the reserves management plan around trying to find, make sure we had the the history and the right acknowledgements on the different bits of reserve, and potentially that's something that with doing this will flush some of that out to add to our review of the reserves management plan, because we do need to respect those
Yeah.
into the future, and if it's not recorded in our documents, then it becomes a challenge for us to continue to recognise, so. So maybe maybe have a conversation with Penny about that. That's good. Right, anyone else? It's a very technical thing to have to resolve under the different bits of legislation with the two hats, thank you. Okay, so thank you, we'll just work through the recommendations. So the first one is grant a lease to the Porongaho Sports Club Incorporated for a portion of White Domain. Dundas Street, Porongaho, legally described under CT section 6 BLK 12 Porongaho Survey District in accordance with section 54(1)B of the Reserves Act 1977 for a term of 11 years with 2 rights of renewal of 11 years, subject to not receiving any sustained objections following public consultation as the administering body of the reserve. Second one is granting a lease to the Porongaho Sports Club Incorporated for the same details, subject to not receiving any sustained objections following public consultation under delegated authority from the Minister of Conservation. So we are recognised as the administering body of the reserve and also the delegated authority from the Minister of Conservation to make this decision. So can I have a mover and a seconder for those recommendations, please? Mr. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Whitman, would you like to speak?
Just to say that to thank the group out there for the work that they're doing, the plans they have, noting Paddy's comments earlier about the history of the land would be great in this process. Yeah, look forward to seeing what the consultation brings out there, making sure that the club has the wider community support for their plans. Well done to them.
Support what Councillor Taylor said, so just recognising what Piri has mentioned. Hopefully the board has done their due diligence in terms of that, because that could hold up things. It's not done. Wish them all the best. Look forward to it.
Yeah, I think it's great that our sports club has got the initiative to do this. Coming to the council to ask anything, and all we have to do is release. So I think it's a win.
Anyone else? Councillor Minehead.
Just like to add, even though we're here as well, also represented in front of us, that they also they will encourage other groups and use that facility, and they're most welcome to. And I think that's a really good idea, multi-purpose. And the old club was really partially used by date not long ago. And I think I had an icicle on my nose. Pretty cold.
Yes. Thank you. I mean, from my perspective, this is our job to be the guardians, but actually our job to get out of the way, because the initiative and the leadership from community groups, just like we've approached to these kinds of situations in other parts of the district, we are the administering bodies or the delegated authorities under some legislation on behalf of community, but this is where these assets are so important for community to be doing what community needs to do, and our job to get out of the way as best as possible. And so I'm really pleased to see this project move forward. Councillor Taylor, back to you.
Yeah, I was going to finish with something along the lines of what you've just said, so I won't. I'll take it to the vote.
So moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against. Next item is page 40, local water done well update.
Thank you, Your Worship. Local water done well, our favourite topic at the moment. So look, two recommendations and resolutions that I'm going to take you through today. The first one just being an update generally on where we're at with consultation. But the second one being a bit more pointed and clear about the steps that we're taking around the $7,000 number in our community consultation in terms of options that are available to us. For those potentially listening online, Local Water Done Well, we're out consulting at the moment. Again, this is the government's approach to resolving our affordability and long-term challenges that we have with our Three Waters infrastructure. Again, this table has had multiple reports on this over the years, but most notably at the 24th of April meeting and the 12th of August, where we confirmed options and the consultation document, with consultation starting on the 12th of May and ending in on the 15th of June, again on the three options that we have available to us for water services delivery model, the regional CCO being our preferred approach. Just talking through where we're at currently with consultation at the time of writing, this was the end of last week, we updated this, we were sitting at 71 submissions, and I think I've got the number in there for the unique. It was about 680 odd unique hits onto the page. We're now close to nearly 1,000 unique users on the page, which was a good place, and sitting at about early 80s as of this morning for submissions across the 90s, right? We keep climbing. So again, working through that. We've been working through again a series of community conversations with Local Water Done Well being the feature, but also including our eroding recovery programs and updates on the annual plan, which obviously having just struck the rate this morning is kind of pertinent to those. But again, having worked through each of the communities, Elsthorpe being our latest community on Tuesday last week, and for those that are online, they can tune in to see the friendly faces of myself, Her Worship and councillors Ian and Byrne tonight on our Facebook Live, and obviously Waipawa next week and Tony next week as well. But again, look, probably the really key message that we are hearing, and you can draw your own reflections on the conversations to date, are primarily around the cost. What we're seeing in the early feedback is, again, support generally for the option, but again, just recognising we've got to do on that $7,000 number and drivers of it. So moving on to the drivers of the cost in pages 41 and 42, talk about, again, what the really big drivers are. And for us to remember at this stage, you know, as much as it's a $7,000 number that's sitting in the model, that is all-in number based on what was sitting inside our long-term plan. And worst case might not be the right term, but it's making sure that we've got as clear a picture of the perfect storm of capital investment that sits in terms of what's required for our district. What it does clearly demonstrate, again, this is just the Central Hawke's Bay numbers, is being very clear that just as Central Hawke's Bay, there is benefit for us being in a regional CCO. So having done no other work, having done no other evaluation on the options or how to get numbers down, just as the LTP sits, or the 10-year plan, or 3-year plan, I should say, that looks at 10 years sits, clearly there's a demonstrated benefit cost-wise and non-financial drivers for the regional model. So that's, again, probably one of the really important pieces for us to at least have demonstrated. But there are 4 things in particular that we are working through as officers. Don't expect that this will all be landed by September, and certainly some of this is going to be ongoing work as we look towards the 2027 LTP. But this table had an update from Taumata Arawai only a few weeks ago on the proposed changes to the wastewater standards. That will have some impact on some sites, but noting we've still got some pretty big investments to make both in Waipawa and Waipawa. So noting that that's some further analysis that we've got underway. And workshop today, we've also got Taumata Arawai back online talking about acceptable solutions. So that will be for some of our smaller drinking water supplies. So what the impacts of that may be in terms of simplifying requirements. So again, understanding what the impact of that may be. The third point, and Mr. Chamberlain talked a little bit earlier about kind of phasing and timing of projects. And this is really about trying to understand what's an acceptable level of resilience for Central Hawke's Bay moving forward within the local water done well, economic framework that exists, but also the regulation that will sit in terms of water standards. So this is some work that we've got underway around if second supply, just primarily around drinking water, if second supply is our primary resilient option for the future to build resilience into our drinking water networks, how much investment and what is the timing for our other reservoir replacements that we've got currently inside this next 3 years of 3-year plan. So again, that's a key piece of work that the team have got underway. The fourth piece of work that we're doing is kind of what we're calling some affordability caps. So based on some numbers or some percentages of household income, what would that number be? So working off a number of around $5,000 at the moment, and working back across our programs of actually what could we then afford to do based on a cap of that number. So we're aiming, again, we've got some of that work underway. It's pretty with belts and braces for now, but the aim is to present some very high level numbers to you for the 19th of June Finance, Infrastructure and Performance meeting on the economic options. The very last one that I want to talk about is again, without predetermining the decision that Council will make in July in terms of whether it endorses and moves forward with the regional option as its preferred option. But noting that we've got work in terms of any future regional entity, how we work through the makeup of what that would be. And again, on the 19th of June, we will be having a workshop to work through each of those components. And this will be about where we can look to what are the things that we need in any future water services entity. Again, not to predetermine the decision, but to make sure that we are as best placed as council and as advocates for community to make sure that the concerns that we hear from the submissions that we receive are well reflected inside any future term sheet for a future organisation. So again, not to predetermine anything. So the top of page 43 talks about what those things are. And again, for workshop on the 19th of June, we'll be working through those. We'll be having someone external come and help us facilitate that and really work through what the areas of focus will be. And again, includes things like pricing harmonisation, but it could also be some really simple things like how do we get what's a time frame to have a 30-year capital program across all of Hawke's Bay that considers all of the costs across all of the councils and what price pathways might be. So they're the sorts of things that we can pragmatically point to and say we would like this, and this as we work through the next stages. Again, assuming that that's what the table so just probably speaking about next steps and how we move forward. So focusing really again on the 19th of June, our aim is to have hearings on the submissions on that day. And again, it's a pretty tight turnaround, but later this week, tomorrow actually, we'll be dropping into your portals the first tranche of the submissions that we've received. So you'll start to be able to get some time to read through those, and ahead of the Finance, Infrastructure and Performance agenda heading out next week, you'll get another tranche of those on Friday to start to work through, but certainly aiming for deliberations on the 19th of June. I've tentatively still planned that the 3rd of July we're having deliberations. There's just some regional discussions around timing of some possible further information that we may want to consider at that time. But at this stage, I'm aiming for the 3rd of July. And really, for me, in terms of setting out a good process, that's where I need this table to hear on its preferred option. But in particular, what might be some of the key points that we then need to take through into negotiations into any future regional entity. So again, just working through timing with our regional partners, also completely relative to the decisions that they make as well. So look, just with that, just want to close. Look, particularly note the weight and the burden of the $7,000, and like I'm hearing that really clearly, certainly sits as a big priority for me as Chief Executive when we sit through community and hear these things, and the concern, working hard to work out a good, clear strategy of how we get that number down. How do we give confidence into the future that this is a model of just us going alone? And again, no one wants to see levels as they are. Certainly, that's not success from my perspective, and I'm sure it's not success from anybody around this table's perspective either. But being very clear, we've got a good pathway to work through. But still a long process to work through in terms of how we work through the next steps of negotiation. Again, assuming the regional model gets through, but again, with a clear view that we've got to work hard to get that. So. With that, Your Worship, happy to take any questions. But again, being clear, we've got still a long way to go in the journey of seeing this entity.
Thanks. Right, so we've got kind of there's a couple of pieces to this, which is about the local approach, like what's directly in our hand in terms of the path of investment, but then also the process around the regional entity. Just thinking about the local bit. So Mr. Tate has described the 4 key areas where we actually can look directly at our own investment program. So looking at the wastewater standards, the acceptable solutions, the risk and resilience trade-offs in the program, and also the economic options. Is there anything else at that local level that we think would be helpful to provide feedback on? That would be helpful in the programming, Councillor Anand?
I really I'm at a stage where and I think the community are at a stage as well, that we actually start to need to see past the 3rd of September.
Yeah.
A few people have said to me, people think that what they read the $7,000 number in the headline and they are confused with the fact that actually on the 1st of July that's now going to happen. So that's where we're trying to dispel that. The other thing is that people are thinking the 3rd of September, boom, it's going to be over, the decision's going to be made, and suddenly, you know, we need to know very clearly before we even make this decision, what is the process that we are setting ourselves or this next council table up for and the business up for, and what is the timeline, what is the process, when when do we actually get those these are the views of Central Hawke's Bay moments around price harmonisation. When are the inroads to be able to actually make sure that we are being heard in all of that? So yeah, I think that's really important, because I think now we're at a point with the community, the shock factor is there, people are interested, but we also need to give them assurance now that this is not over, this is just beginning, and there's a lot of work to do, and we are up for this council, whether it's us or whoever, needs to be up for the fact that this is actually going to be a big piece of work, and what is our sort of tactic, and how do we actually play our part in that in the next, how long? I mean, goodness knows how long. It's like it could be 3 months or it could be 3 years. We just so.
Okay, so that's helpful. So expressing what the process is past 3rd of September, so that we can are really clearly able to articulate that. I think that's really important. We don't know all of that, but support to Mr. Tate within the system to be able to map that out is important.
And so just and I think about Takapo community, they are now putting together a group of ratepayer and different people that are interested, which I think is absolutely fabulous, but we need to give them the knowledge and tools as to actually how they can use that passion and that drive, and where their inroads are to be able to have an influence in this, because I think that's the thing that concerns me is people. We've grown up with this, oh, they never listen sort of a mentality, and it's actually not true. We can actually, we've shown time and time again that even though we're small, council, we do punch above our weight, and we can actually really, with the community backing us, actually have a real inroad into making policy changes in this space. And I think, yeah, we need to mobilise, and people need to know how to mobilise.
Yeah. Okay. So the second point is not just about that we need to see the process past 3rd of September, but actually where the views of community will sit through that too. So it's kind of got two pieces to it. Thank you, Councillor Boone.
Yeah, I agree, because I think we've been here before. We have been. When I started in 2020, we were talking 3 waters, and we were moving towards, and we would have been up, the whole entities would have been stood up by now. So I agree. People need to know where we're going. It does feel like the central government is still, building the plane. There's still things that we don't know about. So we need to give our community some hope that 7,000 is not a target that we ever want to reach. And I'm just wondering, to me, is there alternatives? Is there external investment or whatever that we can help to not even get to 7,000?
Thank you. So I think there's probably a point in there about how do we collate the points of uncertainty that the legislative framework is giving us that we can provide feedback at the government level as well, because you're right, some things like the wastewater standards or the third piece of legislation is actually, it's making it more difficult. So let's get really specific to provide that.
And then we've got central government elections next year as well. What does that mean? Are we flip floppy here? You know?
Thank you, Councillor Taylor.
One of the big things for me is the 10-year timeframe. I'm just interested in, Mr. Tate did mention it at some point of this, that pushing back on, seems absolutely crazy to be even remotely talking about a 10-year timeframe with something as big as the infrastructure that we're dealing with. So I think at some point we've got to go 30 or 50 and not accept talking a 10-year timeframe.
That's good. And when in the process can we get to that?
Yeah.
Actually, that's been a really good conversation in community where people have understood that kind of language about we're trying to pursue long-term sustainability, but the model's only asking us to provide 10 years of data. And we know better than anyone that 10 years is not long-term.
Yeah.
That's good. Okay. Right, thank you. Mr. Tate, what do you want to do with those things?
Yeah, so just maybe being clear about kind of what the plan for the 19th is as well. So the 19th, you will have been hearing submissions. That's the key part. So you'll be able to have reflected on the feedback that you've had from community over this period of time. Clearly not deliberating, just hearing at that point. And that afternoon workshop session again will be we've got an external facilitator leading you through all the makeups of a potential future regional CCO and what those things could be that you are trying to achieve. So in reflecting on the points that you've raised this morning, there's some things in there that we can take away that will feed naturally into that process. There's some other aspects that we can think about in terms of how we communicate back to community at this stage, having received the submissions, and say thank you. These are the next steps. So I think there's a good segue, but certainly that workshop on the 19th is going to be quite important in terms of how we collect those things. Like what are by the 1st of July 2027, we would like a 30-year capital work program completed for the entire Hawke's Bay region as a requirement to go into the regional CCO. So there are some things that we can that direction as well. Probably just my kind of closing point is we need to look out beyond the 3rd of September, but also just kind of being cognizant as well that we've still got other councils to go through their decision points. And I think this is part of the challenge that we've got where for many of us, it's logical. People want to jump straight to the answer and to the solution, and we've got lots of work. So there's probably some more work and some further communication that we can do again, and that kind of close out of the submission process about what are the hold points and what are the next steps. So being really clear from here, the next key point is to make sure that having done the submission, having completed the consultation process, all of the councils having gone through the hearing process and the deliberation process, assuming that the regional CCO is even confirmed by the region as kind of that first kind of gateway and first milestone. So in many respects, we're keen to jump ahead, and it's about how do we be clear about what those gateways or those milestones are as we work through. So thank you.
Councillor Anand.
Yeah, I reflect on that, Mr. Tate, and I think well, I'll be the first to put my hand up to say that I probably that's why I'm asking at this stage. I've only just come around to the fact that there actually is a timeline and there are milestones and there are seasons for certain conversations. I've given myself over to that because I want to always go to the solution. You know me. Happy to go with that, but I need to see it, and I think our community need to see it as well. Like, okay, this is the season for this conversation, and when you bring that up, yes, that is a very valid point, but we need to park it and we need to put it in here in the timeline. And it might be just high level sort of stuff, but I think I need that, so our community is going to need that. We and especially past this table of people, the next generation of councillors will need to know very clearly how they are going, what the process is and that, and we need to start communicating that now. is my. And I had one other question for you, Mr. Tate. I was just wondering, what is, have you had any feedback from other councils? Like how are their consultations going?
So without getting into too much of speaking for others, so we know that Hastings, again, they're up with, I think, about 600 or 700 submissions now. So much, but again, different approach. They've got mailed out to every single household across the district. They've got very different approach and a different budget too.
Yeah.
Wida was quite a bit more similar to us, probably struggling to get a bit of the exposure, and Napier again working through their own. Generally, I think again the commentary that you've seen across the community is probably consistent. I think what the difference is where the underlying issues, and again you can just look on without talking too out of school, you can just look at other councils' Facebook pages and the polls that they're sharing around actually what other drivers. Cost is a big key driver for us. The resilience and safety of the network in Napier seems to be more of a. And that's just from the polls that you can see across the different council pages. So,
Right. Is there anything in that would be helpful for us to have an additional resolution about this, or we're just going to add those points into your approach that we've got here? So we've got a resolution to support the approach being adopted by officers to address the affordability challenges identified in Central Hawke's Bay local water done well modelling, and that we note the update in next steps. Would it be helpful to you to have any specific have a resolution on the additional things, Mr. Tate?
Your Worship, what I will undertake to do is at the 19th of June report, when I present the hearing submissions back to you, we'll present in that report timeline, more of a detailed timeline of the expected gateways and when you can. You're clear about at this point of the decision or that point of the hearing, you're doing this. So we'll try and bring that to you as a bit more of a clearer program of the inputs, the timing for us as well. So I'm comfortable that I don't need a resolution.
Good, Councillor Anna.
Sorry, one more question. I just was wondering, what happens? What is the plan if our community comes back with a resounding no to CCO? Because we have to go with, well, consultation is consultation. We're asking them for a reason. My concern is that there is not enough in our presentation and our conversations about what the benefits are of the CCO. So just wondering whether or not we just need to maybe try and put more into that. That's my thoughts.
Yeah. I think that's a really live issue for us, and I think it's a really live when I think about the order in some ways that we're backed into in terms of the government signals and the legislation as well. And we do need to think about what that looks like, because ultimately if there is that view, then we're going to have to work through some further things. And then the 3rd of September, when we submit a water services delivery plan, we actually don't even know how the Department of Internal Affairs is going to assess them. They can't even tell us how they're going to assess them. So we have to kind of act in the best faith that we can with the information at hand, and deal with what's in front of us. But what I'm hearing is in the community and through how people are dialoguing on this is that they understand that they hate the affordability path that we're on, but they see the benefits of working together. So I think we are getting through some of that messaging. Okay. Thank you. Right, so the two resolutions there, have a mover and a seconder, please, for noting the report and the next steps and supporting the approach that officers going to do with the affordability challenges identified in our modelling. Councillor Byrne and Councillor Annan, would anyone like to add anything further?
Just that, yeah, affordability is really everything we're hearing. I think people, like you said, do agree that we need to do the work. It's how we pay for it, and who's paying for it is the concern. We had the hui last night, and yeah, I'm talking about the second water supply. There was no doubt people agreed it needs to happen, but yeah, the affordability is the issue. And that's something that we need to continue to push, and I'm happy to recommend that.
Anyone else? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Next item is LGNZ AGM delegate nominations and remits, page 45. No, so generally what we do with these is the AGM's coming up in July. We have got 5 remits that have been put up by members or groups of members of LGNZ around things that they would like the sector to be advocating on. And so we can just work through those, have some discussion, generally take an allergic reaction approach. As in, we generally will support, but if we've got an allergic reaction and don't think it's relevant, we'll kind of flag it and decide on our approach then. So there's a number here. The first one is on page 49, which is security system payments. Very technical things. This is lines up with some of the concerns circulating in the sector about safety and security of elected members and how that is supported. Everyone should have been able to read this. Is there an allergic reaction to us voting in support of this remit? Councillor Moynihan.
Yes, I'm against this remit. I reckon because the cost may ultimately fall on the local councils and ratepayers. Not all elected members face the same risk. Blanket allowance may be unnecessary in areas where risks are low.
So I think there's a trying to understand the detail of it. It's about a bit like the childcare allowance one. It comes down to a decision of the policy of the local authority whether they would do anything with it or not. Just provides the. So that's just thinking about what you just said, councillor, about whether it's, you know, different levels of risk and the different choices around the country. Provides an option rather than a must do. Anyone else in the allergic reaction to it? Is it necessary? Would we want to vote against it if there are others in the sector who think that it's necessary? Councillor again.
Yeah, I mean, I was in support of what someone had said, and then I thought that I've taken part in some of the online meetings where we've discussed this, excuse me, security of some elected members and what others go through, although we mightn't be experiencing it here, and we just get some nasty Facebook messaging. But a lot actually have people visiting their homes and threatening their lives. You know, maybe it is something that you can opt in and opt out of. So maybe it is something that, yeah, we should support for other councils, even if it's not relevant to our own.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think we should support it for the reasons that Councillor Burns just outlined. I know of the one in Central Otago, and the thought of being a younger councillor with a young family and having somebody coming to your home is unacceptable, and anything we can do. But I would like to believe that a council would do something at that point to help that elected member. So I was in two minds as to whether I agree with all the comments that have been said both ways. I'd probably support it rather than not support it, but with provisos.
Sure. It doesn't. Yeah. What else? So we'll support recognising what you've raised is the second one is improving joint management relationships from Northland Regional Council and Zone 1, advocating for legislative change to make joint management agreement mechanisms more accessible for councils to use with iwi hapu, provision of technical, legal and financial support. To facilitate the use of JMAs for joint council and iwi hapu environmental governance, and for a mechanism such as JMAs to be included in the government's human resource management legislation. Not something that we have got a huge amount of experience in here. I would say yet, to be honest. The Hawke's Bay region approach is slightly different because of the Regional Planning Committee. So Aitken has an allergic reaction.
Agree with it.
Anyone else? The joint management agreements are currently described in statutory obligations under the Resource Management Act. And clearly they've got a bit of challenges to how they're actually working. Anyone else with an allergic reaction? This is clearly something that is affecting some of our councils as well.
It's aiming to make it better, I'm.
I need to make it more efficient.
Just worried that does it step on what we've already got going on here? Is it something that will, if they advocated to the government and it did actually get into to being, then what are the implications of that? How do things change? You know,
It's simply enabling,
oh, so it's not,
it's enabling the current piece of legislation to work more effectively.
okay,
That's basically what they're aiming to do. It's already set out in legislation that it's provided for. So it's just enabling it in a more efficient and straightforward way.
It's going to come up in resource management reform. Anyway, that's part of what.
Let it come up there first before we make a decision. You know, my concern here is that it talks about financial support. And we haven't got that sort of money, and I don't know who's going to give it to them, and why is it to one group and not the rest?
Yeah, so the management agreements are to do with specific issues under settlements and whether provisions are under the Resource Management Act to allow for that. And it's a mechanism that has been underutilised, actually, a bit like the mana whakahono arohi that have been legislated for, but underutilised because they're a bit unwieldy. It needs to be more efficient. Right, do we have anyone else allergic reaction, or are we willing to support the continued direction of it? Moving forward with it then. Alcohol licensing fees, Far North District Council. LGNZ advocates for the government to update sale and supply of alcohol fees regulations to account for inflation, include a mechanism for automatic annual inflation adjustments. This is a little bit like the litter, the litter just thing too, which gets set centrally by government, but then it's useless to be able to implement in an inflationary environment. Any allergic reaction to it? No. Number 4, aligning public and school bus services. This is put forward by Nelson City and the regional sector. Advocate for reform of the Ministry of Education funded school bus services to provide an improved service for families and to better integrate services with council provided public transport, including the option of public transport authorities, e.g. regional unitary councils managing such services, meaning the school bus services, with appropriate government funding, noting that councils better know their local communities, have the potential to reduce congestion from better bus services, and efficiency gains realised from integrating these two publicly funded bus services and the outdated and inflexible rules of the current centralised school system.
that's definitely
Yeah. The interesting thing about this, having spoken to Ministry of Education people about these bus issues, is actually at the bottom of the page there when it says the centralised school bus transport system is governed centrally by archaic, rigid rules that date back nearly 100 years. And the way that it's set up is kind of like it's not legislated. It's like a policy environment that got set 100 years ago, and everyone's been too scared to actually try and fix it for 100 years.
Through the Regional Transport Committee has been very vocal back to the Ministry of Education and has written letters about this and had people come and talk to the Regional Transport Committee about it. And it's the Ministry of Education people are just very, this is our policy. Can you change yeah, so it's anything that will enable that system to change is welcomed.
Any allergic reactions? No, good. Certainly when I think about the private arrangements that have popped up in CHB because of lack of bus services, some sense. 5 is review of local government arrangements to achieve better balance, put forward by Tauranga City and supported by the rest of the metro sector. That LGNZ works with the government and councils to review current local government arrangements, including the functions and structure of local government to achieve a better balance between the need to efficiently and effectively deliver services and infrastructure, while still enabling democratic local decision-making and action for and by and on behalf of communities. This is trying to walk between a few different pieces of how local government reviews have gone over the last few years. And I think the sector trying to front foot that how do we talk about these things with government sooner rather than later, so that it's not just done to us. That's my sense of it. Allergic reactions?
We've been trying to do that for years. It's interesting that's coming from Tauranga City Council. That's just really just.
Yeah.
No allergic reaction.
Okay.
So wants to do something in that area. It's going to.
All right, so we then need to, now my talking is scratched. We need to prioritise the 5 as the second step. Based on the conversation, I'm guessing that this is prioritised in terms of how we would like LGNZ to use its resource to back these. So based on the conversation, I think the bus one just about got the most amount of conversation is probably the first one, which was number 4. What would the next one be? Just while I get my papers back up, because someone got the licensing fees.
Yeah.
Which was number 3. What was the other ones that were relevant to us? What about the local government balancing one, the Tauranga one?
Yeah, that's right.
The systems one, number 5. Security and joint management agreements, the other 2, weren't they? RMA 1.
I think for us, we don't have, touch wood, any security concerns and we don't have any joint management agreements, so it's hard to push them up the
So
priority.
you're doing 4th equal.
Yeah.
So it's kind of 1 and 2 in that we're interested, but it's not necessarily relevant for us in terms of human resource.
It's like it's become relevant with the security.
Okay, cool. Right, so that gives us
Thank you.
something to put into the actually the resolutions are missing the fact that we have to vote and we have to have priorities for some reason. I'm not sure. So we need to have recommendation number 4. In fact, what we might do is supports the following remits. Number 3 supports the following remits at the LGNZ AGM 2025 in the following order of priority.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah.
Correct. 4, 3, 5, 1, 2. Right, so then we have the delegates. So I will be there, Ali will be there, the 2 voting appointed members at the AGM and Chief Executive, and I think Councillor Muggeridge, you're going to be there, aren't you? As observers.
Is there any other opportunity?
Like what?
Can I go?
We kind of decided this quite some time ago.
Well, I'm now asking when we can.
That's different to this. That's different to this decision. About that later. So the recommendations are that we have myself and the deputy mayor as the 2 voting members delegated by us at that AGM, and that Mr Tate and Councillor Muggeridge are observers, and that we support the following remits of 43512. I'm moving a seconder, please. Councillor Moynihan and Councillor Byrne. Anyone like to add anything? All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. How are we doing, folks? Do we need 5 minutes to stretch your legs? Or do we want to keep going? Like we keep going? Okay, we're just going to suspend the meeting for 5 minutes for a quick toilet break, and we'll be back. So let's just mute. Cool, great. Welcome back. Item is page 58, Hawke's Bay Tourism Update and Delegations, based on the direction we'd given a few weeks ago. Mr. Tate.
Right, thank you, Your Worship. So yes, very much based on the direction a few weeks ago. So this report provides an update, both in terms of the draft letter of expectation and the draft KPIs for feedback from the table. So again, welcome any feedback on that. But just probably noting, particularly on the discussion section on pages 59 and at the top of page 60, the process that we've worked through together. So myself, the Deputy CE of Hastings District Council, and with support as well from Napier, have been working through this process together to now get to a point of having a draft set of KPIs. This has been workshopped with Hastings on Thursday last week, seeking feedback from our council this week, and is going through Napier this week as well. So again, just working through that process that we've all got the opportunity to provide feedback to both the draft letter of expectation and the KPIs as well. There were some set conditions that council had in terms of working through the process. That was in terms of clarifying a budget and a detailed future operating budget, being really clear that the KPIs and the letter of expectations being set on the available budget, which is a slightly lower budget than was originally discussed when we first presented the report at the council in February. So again, just working through that and just recognising that there is a cap for the services that can be delivered within the letter of expectation. So if there's any appetite for an increase in services or to do things on a much larger scale, again, just being cognizant that we've worked within a capped budget for the work. Probably the notable thing relating back to the delegations to Her Worship, which I'm asking you to provide. Again, it's my recommendation to provide it to Mayor Walker, which is consistent with the approach that will be taken by Hastings and by Napier City Council as well, as noting that as part of the changes as a constitutional change by Hawke's Bay Tourism for an appointment board. That appointment is currently a Hawke's Bay Regional Council appointment. So again, setting a pathway for how that appointment will be made, but also providing delegation to Her Worship to execute and sign off on the final letter of expectation for feedback as well. Just noting, particularly in terms of timeframes, we want to have this locked and loaded by. So with that, Your Worship, happy to take any feedback on the letter of expectation or just any questions during it.
Mr. Tate, I'm going to suggest that on number 3, which is appointing to the selection panel to confirm appointments, that we actually lean on the experience of Deputy Annand to participate in that process on our behalf. Is there an issue with that? That in the decisions. Councillor Aitken.
Yeah, a couple of concerns. Thinking the last conversation we had, I asked for a full budget. To break down full set of accounts, where the money's been spent, what the return on investment is, basically how many overseas trips, national trips has been having by this group, and what the return on that is. I'm concerned that you, and this is saying they want 2 budgets, 1 public and 1 private, for one just for the chief executives. I find that a bit of a, I get the point that they want the public one, but I still think it should be able to go to councillors as well. They're spending the public money. It is public money being spent, and councillors have the right to oversee that, not just the chief executive. So I think that's a point that I want to clarify very clearly, that that private, or whatever you like to call it, that other budget goes to the council, not just chief executive. And there was another point there, but I'll leave it at that because I've said enough.
Okay, so let's pick up on that. It's an interesting conversation because it's similar to ones we've had about some other things recently as well about this. We are not the owners, but we're the funders, and the accountability and where the accountability for the transparency of the numbers are. So it's a good point. Mr. Tate, what have the discussions on this been with the chief executive?
So certainly had a number of conversations on this point, and this probably to your point, Your Worship, this balance between what is the level of transparency and accountability that we have for Hawke's Bay tourism, and is there a requirement that it's a higher level of transparency than what there is for other organisations that we provide funding to? So for other organisations that we have, Sport Hawke's Bay, we don't have that same requirement. So there is a premise of consistency in terms of why just Hawke's Bay tourism. There is a piece of work that we are just working through with the chief executive of Hawke's Bay Tourism. The key concern about the level of detail comes back to there's some privacy issues, particularly in terms of payroll. And the ability to, they are a very small team, and the ability to basically be able to ring fence and identify. So that's their primary. But again, we can still do some further work. Hearing Councillor Aitken's points, if there was appetite to do this, I think you've got to come back to a principal point. We don't do that with any other organisation that we fund similar amounts to, or even. So that's a point for the table to consider.
And I think I'm just going to respond to that. The point is I'm making that we should be. If we're using public money, which is rates-paying money, we should have more accountability on all organisations we give money to. Now, this bit about privacy, you don't have to say who names are and what the wages or salaries are. But I think if we're going to be giving money, we should know just how much they're spending on themselves or giving to their workers as a whole wage It's what we see in our report every year in this council. We see who's getting, we don't see who it is, but we can work it out pretty quick in the public thing. So I don't see what the difference is.
Councillor, if we take, so one of my observations on this with Hawke's Bay Tourism is that the role the regional council has played as a funder on behalf of the region, and then having appointing a member to the board, has created an environment where it hasn't always been clear about where those accountability mechanisms are. So we have an opportunity to do that, but I think we do just need to be careful about the level of detail that is appropriate to it. And maybe the way to look at it is less about what's the tabling of their budgets on our table, and more about how do we interact with the board about the financial protections and the audit and the things they're putting in place so that we build. So I would say that we don't have a trusted relationship with that board because we haven't got a relationship yet. We're going to appoint someone and then have the opportunity to interact with that board. So we haven't had that opportunity up until now. And that's how we need to build it to go forward. So that at the very first opportunity, once we've appointed our board member, to actually engage the relationship back through the chair of strategy, community and growth, and actually have a more direct governance to governance accountability conversation. Other questions? Councillor Taylor?
Just questioning the if measurable line, maintain domestic visitor numbers at 1.7 million if measurable. Page 61 and again in the KPIs.
Yes, the highlighted bit. Yep.
So through you, Worship, that's some work that Hastings are trying to do to see if they can get that data source, because Hawke's Bay Hastings are working through to see if they can.
There's also a parallel piece of work that the Regional Economic Development Agency has just started a wee bit of research around how to do that better measure of that. And so we'll have the opportunity to raise that through that piece of work as well. So just make sure we note that. That's Anand.
And there's quite a lot of stuff in that .loves data report that Libby's been sent out the other week as well. So I would say that will start to mature, which has been needed for a long time, which is quite good. It's starting to sort of come through. So maybe that's where the if measurable at this stage comes into it, because they're still trying to work that out. But yeah, that domestic data has always been really hard to capture. Yeah, because it's only the only thing I've got is credit card data, which talked about a number of times.
Okay, good, Councillor Byrne.
Is it true that Napier are only committed to 1 year? And we committed to 1 year, isn't it?
No, Napier have committed to 2 years. I mean,
Councillor Muggeridge. Wairoa chose not to be part of it. Okay, so I'm going to put the recommendations. I'm going to swap out my name at number 3 for Anand. And so we've got to note the report, note the draft letter of expectations, appointing Deputy Anand to the board selection panel and delegate authority to confirm that appointment to the tourism board. And that delegate authority to me to provide feedback on the letter of expectation and to regionally agree to amendment from the final approval of the letter of expectation to Hawke's Bay Tourism. I'm going to note on that third point that there are 2 particular issues that are incumbent on me to raise in those discussions with that delegation, and that is about the financial audit and accountability, and also the data measurements and the bringing of that together. So that's feedback from the table on those 2 things. So can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Aitken. Add anything, councillors? The comments? All those in favour, please say aye. Councillor Muggeridge noted as against. Next item is page 67. Documents executed under the common seal. Those that haven't seen this before, it's just a official thing that happens that we have no influence over. It's delegated authority, but it's us making the mark of authority from the council on these warrants to these particular staff members. I don't think there's anything to about, just that we note the report. That's where it's been used. Councillor Annan, Taylor. Oh, sorry. It's my hand. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Item 7.9, we have reports from joint committees. This was the minutes from Regional Transport Committee meeting held on the 21st of February. We have had verbal updates from Councillor Taylor prior to now, so there's nothing surprising in this. We're just receiving them for the record to be noted. Can I have a mover and second, please? Councillor Taylor, you can do the mover. One hand, seconder. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. And then date of the next, not the next six, but the next council meeting to be held on 7th of August 2025. Is that an extraordinary? It is normal. Okay, are we having an extraordinary July?
Possibly.
But we don't know yet.
Don't know yet.
Okay, can we change that to be that the next regular meeting of CHBDC will be the 7th of August 2025? But I do want to note that with the decision making we've got to make around local done well and other things, it's possible that we might need an extraordinary council meeting during July, but that's not confirmed yet. Okay. So I'm going to move and second to that for the actions. Councillor Annan and Councillor Liffman. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. So we've got one final item for decisions today, and that is about the appointment to the Hawke's Bay Community Water Trust, which as dealing with the privacy of natural persons needs to be considered in public excluded. So we will be taking a resolution to exclude the public for a short period of time as we do this. So I have a mover and a seconder to move to public excluded, please. Councillor Taylor and Councillor Annett. Those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. That will be the meeting will close at the conclusion of public excluded, but we do have public workshop items that will continue after lunch on partnership arrangements and taumata arawai and a variety of other things. So thank you.